Welcome to the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm your host, Danny Gavin, and together with industry leaders and marketing experts, we'll explore the meeting point of mentorship and marketing. We'll discover how these connections have affected careers, marketing strategies, and lives. Now get ready to get human. Hello, everyone. I'm Danny Gavin, founder of Optage, a marketing professor and the host of the Digital Marketing Mentor. Today, we are talking with Sarah Presch, who's the Director of Digital Marketing for Dragon Metrics, a tool I really love, by the way, which a team of passionate SEO experts and a really, really cool software for SEOs and more. They're dedicated to creating the best SEO software tools in the world to save customers time while delivering valuable insights to help them rank higher in organic search. When Sarah's not touring the world or presenting at conferences in Croatia or her native England or the US, for example, she's busy as the co-founder of Neurodivergent and SEO, an online forum for professionals to come together and support each other. And we're going to talk more about that later. Some of her accolades include European Search Awards finalist, Think Global finalist, silver winner for the Irish National Startup Awards, and many others. Today, we're going to talk about SEO and the psychology of marketing, and of course, mentorship. How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. I just came back from a conference in New Jersey. It was a nonprofit out of everything. So I can relate to the traveling and the conferences.
I'm off tomorrow, so should be packing, and I'm here.
Well, I appreciate you making time. We met in San Diego, and it was so nice to meet. And because of you, I've been able to introduce Dragon Metrics to my students, which has been so cool, and obviously get to know you better and all that you stand for and do. So I'm really excited for the chat today.
Oh, that's amazing. No, me too. It was lovely meeting you there as well.
All right, so let's jump right in. Where did you go to school and what did you study?
So I went to university in Dublin, Dublin City University, to study psychology. That's how I kind of ended up, specializing in psychology and SEO. Before that, I actually studied digital marketing, but actually went back to study psychology, 4 years ago? Because I had a bit of a crisis of confidence in the marketing world and decided that, I was going to give it all up. I was going to become a clinical psychologist. I was not going to touch marketing again. But after a good few years, I kind of rethought that because it takes a long time to study to become a clinical psychologist. And you know what? I can just mix psychology and marketing and it might be a bit easier.
Yeah, and psychology is definitely the cousin to marketing. So I always think it's a really good degree to have.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you look back at like your formal education, are there certain things that stand out to you, like any moments or classes that have been impactful?
I think it has to be kind of when I studied social psychology. I think that's kind of where I fell in love with it and realized, right, I don't want to do kind of the abnormal side of psychology and specialize in clinical. I absolutely love the way people think, and I love the way you can deep dive into kind of why people do what they do and how it impacts society as a whole. Being a marketer is all about, understanding what makes people tick and that kind of stuff. So I just had this click moment. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is what I want to do.
And you also have a really nice accent. Do you just want to let people know like where you come from originally?
Oh my gosh, my accent is so messed up. So I have lived in Ireland, I have lived in the Czech Republic, and I lived in England for a bit when I was a kid. So my accent's just, massive mess. No one has me.
Well, I think it's pretty cool. So it's a nice conglomeration of all the places that you've been. So Sarah, how would you define a mentor?
There's so many different things that go into it, but I think for me, the most important thing about being a mentor is supporting someone and helping someone reach their full potential. Because I see lots of people out there, I've come across people who talk about, being mentors, but kind of don't go all in. My biggest success that I've had as a mentor for other people is where you go full in, you deep dive into kind of, what they need, what they're looking to achieve. And then you literally have to be there for them every single step of the way. Otherwise, you don't get such great results. Well, that's what I found anyway.
What it kind of reminds me of, it's kind of like when someone asks someone, so how are you doing today? Right? And then when a person actually opens up like, well, I'm not really, it's like when you actually like approach it and ask the question, got to be willing to actually be there for someone.
Oh, definitely. And it's sometimes the little things as well, things that you don't think make such a difference, but to them, they might be, mulling over an email for the last day and not really sure what to put in that email. Or even something simple as, choosing a keyword or something, they might be mulling it over for ages. And you can just, it takes 2 seconds of your day just to reply to their text and be like, do it that way. And it makes such a difference to them.
And I know you've spoken about some like mentorship sort of tips or keys to being a mentor. Let's talk about them a little bit. So one of them that you've mentioned is never go into mentoring thinking that you're better than the other person because you're higher up. Anything to add?
To be honest, I think when I got into mentoring, I probably understood mentoring from kind of the whole LinkedIn vibey thing, that you go into it as you're here to help the other person be as good as you. When actually, it's something that I've been learning kind of all throughout my life. The amount of different people that you meet, no matter how old they are, what background they come from, you can learn so much from different people. So even though you might be going in to help them, they can help you learn lots of different things from their side of things as well.
It's funny, but it's sort of like when we give, we often get more, right? So it's
That's
kind of
so
like you might
true.
be thinking you're there to help someone else, but really there's a lot that's coming to help you.
Definitely. And I think even just from being rewarding and, I absolutely love mentoring because it's probably one of the most rewarding things that I can do. And just seeing people grow and seeing people achieve their goals, it's special.
Yeah, it is to be a part of that. You also mentioned making a success plan with regular check-ins, follow-ups, and goals.
Yes. I think especially when the mentee that you're working with is, say, more junior and they're just coming into learning a skill like SEO, you really have to put together kind of like a learning plan. So I'm an ex-university lecturer. So I'm quite used to kind of, putting together, different plans for people and lesson plans and all that kind of curriculums and stuff like that. I do that for my mentees. I make them a lesson plan, I make them a roadmap, and they're going to do X each week, and we're going to go through this. And by the end of it, the aim is to get them to where they want to be it, a promotion at work, or they want to land their first SEO job, something like that. But the more you can create kind of like a personalized curriculum for them, the better they're going to succeed.
Yeah, and that structure really helps, right? It's like just it's like for a regular meeting that you have, having an agenda really, really helps because then you actually can get somewhere. So having that agenda or having that plan, what's the goals, what we're trying to accomplish, I think is key to that success. So I love that point. So let's talk about some of your most influential mentors. Why do you consider them mentors and how they've helped you? Let's start with Simon.
Yeah, so I'm going to sound like I'm probably sucking up to my boss right now by saying this, but when I started working as Dragon Metrics, I've been working in international SEO for, 12 years or so. So I got pretty much up to kind of as high as I could be within organizations that I worked in. And I didn't really have anybody, higher than me that could, help me grow even more. So now when I went into the software world, it was like going right down to the bottom again. And honestly, I have never had such a culture shock as, going from right at the top to right at the bottom as I did about a year ago. I have been so grateful for Simon's guidance that he's given me throughout because I am not a good IT person. I know that that's completely my weak side, but he's kind of believed in me. And I've had this like horrible mindset that I'm really bad at maths. I'm really bad at technical stuff. I can't do it. He's like, no, you can. You just need to believe in yourself. And again, he's put together all of these different kind of like study plans for me of things that I can learn, even when it comes to coding and stuff. I had to learn that, which is completely out of my comfort zone. But he's helped me and he's believed in me and he's pushed me to do things that I never thought I would be able to do. And I think that is key.
Yeah, to me, that doesn't sound like sucking up. It's just like you hit the jackpot on having a boss who's not just a boss, but is literally a mentor, right? Wow.
Mm. Yeah, and the guy's a genius as well. So like I genuinely couldn't think of anybody better to learn from than him. I'm so lucky.
Let's talk about Tasman, who I believe is your coach.
It was one of these people that didn't really believe that coaches could do that much because, typical psychologist therapy is where it's at and that's like that side of things. But when I met Tasman, I was just like, oh my gosh, she makes sense. She can help me. And we started working together and she has seriously like pushed me further with different things that I never would have done without her. I wouldn't have been on the main stage at Brighton SEO a couple of months ago when it was in Brighton if it wasn't for her being like, do it. And I remember on a Sunday morning texting her like, I've had this idea, but I think it's going to be a bit pants. And she was like, no, pitch it, do it. And here we go.
So cool. So having that in a way like that coach, that cheerleader in your corner gives you that extra step. I mean, because you have the psychologist background, how would you compare a coach versus a therapist? And like maybe if someone needed to make a decision on who to have, which way would they go?
I think therapy definitely looks at the past and how the past impacts you in the present, whereas coaches tend not to look into the past and do that kind of like healing therapy side of things, whereas they just look at, your goals into the future and kind of like pull you forward, if that makes sense. So if you did have any sort of trauma that you wanted to deal with, definitely go to a psychologist rather than a coach. However, if you wanted somebody who would, help you meet your career goals, that sort of thing, that's where you'd go to a coach, because therapists aren't really trained in that side of things.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you. So finally, let's talk about Miriam Jessier, who's been instrumental throughout your career.
I met Miriam on LinkedIn, actually. I remember listening to one of her podcasts with Maudie from Way. She was just having a rant about inclusive language in French. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's awesome. So I added her on LinkedIn, wrote her a message about, I really liked your podcast. We kind of stayed in touch. And for the last, how long has it been? Like 2 years, 3 years, she has just been, helping me get into different things, teaching me how to do different stuff. She's just been helping me every single step of the way. And I would not be where I would be in my career now in the SEO industry if she didn't give me that kind of, newbie advice, take me under her wing and then help me really thrive.
And I love like these three sort of mentors that you've chosen to like portray. Like it's awesome because like you have your boss, you have a coach, and then you have like a friend. And
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know if we say everyone needs like this trio, but I mean, I think it's perfect, right? So having those mentors in your life in all stages, right? So someone on the side, someone at the work, someone who's like more of a friend. I think that's such an awesome combination, and how lucky you are to have that with you.
I know, like looking back at it, and even like the people that I didn't mention, there have been so many people that have been instrumental in helping me get to where I am, that it just inspires me more to try and give that to other people who haven't had that, or say haven't had that on their journey yet, just so that I can give back, because it's something special that you can do.
And one of the ways that you've given back, and I'm sure part of it is mentorship, is the Neurodivergence and SEO group that you've co-founded. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit more about it?
This was probably one of the most ADHD ideas that me and the co-founder Jack ever had. We were at Brighton SEO. You can see this as becoming a common theme. We were at Brighton SEO and we were thinking that, there's all of these different communities within SEO, but there's no space for kind of like neurodivergent folk like us. So we're like, let's make one. In true ADHD fashion, we set up a Google form. We made a LinkedIn page and we went live. We were thinking that maybe 1 or 2 people would sign up and then we'd be like, yay, we have some friends. And that would be it. But it's kind of grown. And now we have well over 200 members in, I think it's like 30 different countries around the world now.
Wow.
We've provided opportunities for people to go to conferences, to do training courses and stuff, because unfortunately, using autism as a statistic, can't remember off the top of my head I think it's 73% of autistic adults are unemployed, even though they want to be unemployed. You can see that within the neurodivergent community, within SEO as well, that you've got all of these really, really talented SEOs, but for folks that aren't their own, interviewing processes are not set up for them. So we've done like interview training courses for like a 4-week course and stuff like that. Training courses are not so accessible. And if you're unemployed, you can't afford to pay, $1,000 for a training course and stuff like that. So it's just trying to break down those obstacles and just help neurodivergent SEOs, do their best in their career.
Are there only SEOs or other digital marketing specialists in the group?
We've got quite a lot, actually. So we've got digital PR people, we've got PPC people, we've got translators who specialize in SEO translation, got content writers. As long as they work in digital marketing and they have something to do with SEO, that's kind of like all that matters, really. Even if you just want to learn SEO and you're not quite there yet, come and join us.
How's the feedback been just from the members? Has it been very positive?
It has been. And, from my point of view, I feel like I finally found a community where we can kind of just be ourselves and we can be our kind of unmasked selves. Because I don't think, as much as people say they're open, I don't think they're quite ready for a bunch of autistic people to network in a very autistic way. It's been perfect. And, we've had people who have sent us messages saying we actually landed our first job in SEO because of the training course that you provided.
Wow.
And things like that. So, it's really cool.
Very special. Well, thank you for providing that service to our digital marketing community. And I wouldn't necessarily call it just a service, because I think it's more than that, right? It's really it's a group. It's a support system. So it's awesome.
Mm.
Thank you. Let's pivot into more on the psychology side of things. So I believe you worked in SEO for almost 10 years before returning to school and getting a psychology degree. What motivated you to do that?
Honestly, I was so sick of making money for rich people to get them even richer that I was like, I want to give back. I don't want to do this anymore. So I kind of had my end of 20s crisis and had a bit of a hissy fit that lasted quite a while. So I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go back and become a clinical psychologist, which in Ireland takes 6 years and a doctorate, which
Wow.
no, it's longer than 6 years. Gosh. But anyway, it's a really, really long time. So yeah, I kind of saw sense before I got to the doctorate stage. Yeah, decided to stick out the marketing thing and just combine the two. And it's so interesting and it goes really well together.
So you present extensively at conferences worldwide and have mentioned that your presentations are informed by ethical considerations. What are those considerations and why are they important to address?
To be honest, this is going to sound a little bit like a rant against the
It's
marketing
okay.
world, but I think when it comes to marketing and especially when it comes to SEO, we get a bit of a bad rep because, we just want to rank at all costs. We don't think about the users. We don't think about the ethical side of what we're doing. We just want to get content out there. And now with AI, it's just gone a little bit mad with all of that. Whereas seeing it from a psychology point of view, seeing how it impacts the way, people's brain works, how society works as a whole, sometimes we really need to sit back and just be like, no, this is not for the greater good. We should not be doing this.
So with the recent Google leak, I know you've been out a little bit, but I'm sure you've been hearing things going on. From an ethical perspective, there's a lot of people saying, hey, Google kind of lying to us. They've said one thing to the other. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have so many thoughts on this. This is where a psychology degree is really good because critical thinking, we are trained that we're not allowed to go in and openly support anything without, considering all of the evidence first. So the Scrooge in me, the first time that I heard about this leak, I was like, I don't like this. I want to read it. I need to find out what's going on. And of course, you've got people jumping on the bandwagon. It's like exactly the same as you had, when the Yandex leak happened a while back, that all of a sudden everybody, even people who don't speak Russian, even people who've never done Yandex before, were suddenly Yandex experts. So now all of a sudden they're Google leak experts. So with my critical thinking lens, this is an API leak. These are not ranking factors leaks, first of all. Secondly, it's from quite a while ago. So SEO has evolved since then. Thirdly, as SEO, surely it's not our job to kind of experiment and find out what works for our clients. If we know what works, why should a leaked document, make us change our minds about stuff that we have actual physical evidence for?
Those are all great points. It's funny because there are some really big people in our industry who've come out and said we should be changing what we're doing and things like that. So how do you feel when you hear that?
Honestly, again, just common theme, the psychologist in me is just like bandwagon effect. What are you doing? Just why are you behaving like this? Why are you not looking at all of the evidence? There are, psychological phenomenon that goes on that makes people behave in a certain way. So I just put it down to that. But it surprises me that in this industry, there does seem to kind of be a little bit of a lack of critical thinking in certain things. And everybody is very quick to jump on the bandwagon and so on. And I think we need to slow down. We need to, look at the evidence first, look at what works, and then we can decide what to do. Otherwise, you risk it kind of blowing up into probably what it shouldn't be. And especially when you have a lot of followers as well, you have a responsibility to not mislead people and not put, fake findings out there, because there's going to be people who are following that. There's going to be clients who are following that. And then you can impact their rankings and you can impact their business.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem is the social media age that we live in and having to produce that sort of content that's going to go viral and people are going to follow. So it kind of pushes people to maybe make some statements or, jump to conclusions a lot quicker because, man, I got to get it out quickly.
Oh, I think so, definitely. I think in a way, social media is kind of our worst enemy, even though we need it to get our personal brands out there. I think it encourages us to do things that we probably wouldn't do on the non-social media world. So I know that, for example, with my social media, I try to be more careful and not jump on the bandwagon. So yeah, I miss all of these opportunities because I'm not featured with any kind of thought leaders on the topic or anything. But at least I can sleep well at night knowing that, I haven't said anything silly that could mislead people.
I respect that. So this might be an oversimplification, but is it fair to say the more you understand about your audience, the greater your chance of successfully marketing to them? Can you add to that statement?
One of my recent talks and the talks that I'm going to be doing in Croatia on Thursday, we're looking at, cognitive biases. And as much as we like to think that we're not, every single human in the world is biased. I'm biased, you're biased, everybody's biased. And there's nothing that we can really do about it. But by understanding the way people think and what's actually going on behind the scenes, it can help us do a much better job. Like, I'm probably going to go a little bit off on a tangent now, so I apologize.
No, this is good.
One of the things that I'm going to be talking about that I haven't actually talked about before is something called cyberchondria. And that is a mix of cyber and hypochondria. And it's an actual, it basically means that when people are obsessed with looking up symptoms online, comes to worst case scenario and then panic about it, you'd call it the Munchausen effect. If it wasn't online, the people who panic about, getting sick and do it for attention and stuff like that. But online information and online medical content is not helping the situation whatsoever. And having access to forums is not helping whatsoever. And then you have to go and see, all of the SERPs, Reddit's at the top, Quora's at the top. And it's kind of unbelievable because you're thinking this is going to make things like this so much worse. And the more SEOs just create content without thinking about these kind of things and just bulk upload things, because I know there's SEOs out there who work on medical content without being medical experts themselves, it just makes it so much worse. And you actually, it's been linked to excess healthcare deaths and stuff like that. So it's got really, really serious consequences. And yet we should be doing something about it, or at least understanding it.
Yeah, that's very important, especially now with Google's generative AI at the top. And I know that just compounded it because I don't have any examples offhand, but some of the stuff that was coming out there specifically with healthcare and medical was pretty bad.
The other side effect of it as well is, I don't know how common they are in the US, but I know, for example, the NHS in the UK has these AI-driven symptom checkers that they use. And instead of kind of encouraging people just to, talk about the symptoms that they're cold that they're having or the not so serious illness that they're suffering from, it actually puts symptoms inside people's heads. And then people start to worry more. And you see that online when, for example, they get a featured snippet with something more serious in, that they didn't necessarily go in thinking that they had this serious disease, but they came out thinking of it and came out worrying about it. And then just people's anxiety goes overload. People go to the doctors. It takes more healthcare resources. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, definitely a topic we don't talk about, but yeah, it's sort of like the dark side of SEO, right? And the problems that it can cause. Talking about cognitive biases, which of the cognitive biases is the most difficult to work with or market to, and why?
I think confirmation bias, because there's no real way to kind of hack it per se. Because I know when you talk about things like availability bias, there's ways to, people work with the most recent information. So therefore you have to make sure that your brand is the most recent thing that people hear of. And you have to make sure that, you're always making a positive first impression. Whereas confirmation bias is, people don't realize that they're doing it. And when people search for something online, they're actually looking for information that confirms their existing beliefs. So if you type in something like, one of the examples I had was, is ADHD caused by sugar? Google will actually feed you back featured snippets and stuff that proves the point that ADHD is caused by sugar. As SEOs, people kind of look at these keywords and they're like, is ADHD caused by sugar? Perfect, let's make a piece of content about it. Without thinking, again, is this a helpful keyword? Is this a good keyword that we want to write about? Is it going to cause danger in the future to anybody? But nobody knows about it. Nobody knows what confirmation bias is. And it's not part of, training for SEOs or anything like that. So yeah, I think that's a tough one. And it's something, I'm hoping to spread the word about a little bit more. And then hopefully more people would have heard of it and know what to do.
It's interesting because in my classes, I usually get, for example, let's take an industry or a situation which is not as bad, right? Which would be there's two types of digging, like boring or, something else. And therefore you're going to try to, like, you offer the better option, but you try to rank for the other option to let people know, like, hey, this is that, but we can actually do it better by trying something else. To me, ethically, I don't think that's a problem from that perspective, like in a business perspective, but that can distill itself, like you said, like in the medical world, in that could really be a big problem. So we have to be careful. I think it's going to change how I answer that question moving forward, right? I mean, I think confirmation bias takes it to the other perspective where it's like you're creating a piece of content and not looking at all sides and letting people know, like, hey, there are some different perspectives. But a lot of this it's just making me think a lot about, like, we need to have more intent on our content, and if I allow it in one area, how could that affect, right? A strategy. If I allow it in one area, how could that affect in other areas, which could actually be very detrimental to people?
Yeah, I think so. And I think as well with AI kind of world, now people are kind of going, automating keyword research, they're automating kind of the writing process. So quite a lot of these keywords and stuff that people see, it doesn't actually go to a reviewer per se. And that's where these things can kind of creep in. Or if you don't have a reviewer who's, say, well versed at certain topics or actually is aware of certain ethical considerations, it's so easy to get missed. And I feel sorry for SEOs having to deal with this because it is complicated. And I bet for people who are just hearing about it, like, what are you on about? But yeah, no, the much bigger picture to SEOing than people probably first think.
I would say a tangential or similar topic, which you've discussed in recent presentations, is on the culture of psychological safety. Can you explain what that means? And can you provide an example?
Psychological safety is something, in the workplace, it's quite a big buzzword at the moment. The lots of people talk about, we need to be a psychologically safe workplace. The problem is that I don't think people quite understand how it's done, or they kind of see it as more of a tick box exercise. That's especially what I'm noticing with people in neurodivergence in SEO, that you have all of these companies that are talking about how we're inclusive, how we're a psychologically safe company. But in reality, for the people who need it, like the autistic employees, the disabled employees, the people from, ethnic minorities and stuff like that, it's actually not the case. So you need some kind of framework when you're going in and coming up with all of these different phrases and actually getting people involved from these different communities. Because if you say, apologies to the middle-aged white men out there, but if you're a middle-aged white man and you come in and create these processes without speaking to women, without speaking to, people of color, without speaking to disabled people, you're not going to have any idea of kind of the struggles that they're facing. Because like me, I would not be able to, I should not be creating stuff or policies for people of color because I haven't walked in their shoes. I don't know what it's like.
Yeah. It gives a lot to think about. So, but do you feel like when you include people, like, are they going to open up? Or do you feel like, what's the best way to get people's opinions with, like, so that they actually open up and they actually, talk about what they're thinking?
I think there's a couple of ways of doing it. If your company is not deemed psychologically safe, people will not open up to you because they'll feel that you'll use it against them. One way to do that is to say maybe get somebody external to come and speak to them, who will kind of make everything completely anonymous, will, present these findings back to the bosses. And then if the bosses get angry because they don't like what they hear, they're going to get angry with that person rather than the actual employees. Whereas if you have kind of that sort of, open culture, I'll be honest, like if somebody asked me before at my previous workplaces, would I open up again about being, autistic, ADHD and stuff like that? I would not, because it kind of ruins my time there. Per se, but at Dragonmetrics, I went in there, they knew what they were getting. When I joined the company, the bosses asked questions to me, like Simon and Richard, the other co-founder, they asked me questions. They're like, why are you wearing earplugs? Why are you doing this? And I'm like, okay, this is why. Okay, fine, there's nothing weird about it. So when the time comes that, for example, I have to turn around and be like, hey, don't phone me out of the blue, and stuff like that. They're like, yeah, okay, fine. And you feel safe around them. So like if you're genuinely curious and you genuinely ask questions, just to learn, I think that's probably the biggest thing that you can do, because it will make a massive difference rather than just, assuming. And also get to know the people behind the diagnosis rather than panicking that, if you have somebody who's autistic on your team, they're not going to be able to manage, different situations just because of something that you've read or something that you've seen on TV.
So kind of related, but one of my core values at my company is about open communication. And to me, it's been like, I'm trying to be as transparent as possible from like the leadership perspective. Like we're open and we're telling you what's going on. And if we're not having a good quarter, we want to let you know. So in my mind, it's like I'm being really open and I'm communicating. Interesting, in a recent quarterly business review, actually, sorry, it was an APR, it was an annual review with one of my employees. They actually said like, Danny, I don't like, they brought up a really big issue. And I was like, how come you're only bringing it up now? And because I'm like, isn't our culture open communication? And they're like, yeah, but sometimes I don't want to be connected to the idea. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, you're right. Like, if I truly want open communication, you should be able to communicate to me in any way, even also, which means with your name not included, right? So it was like, man, we need a anonymous form. And I know that sounds like so simple and silly, but we were actually missing it.
Yeah.
And it was like, ooh, and I felt really bad about it, but it was like so simple. But it was like, I was so glad that like that was brought up because I thought I was checking all the boxes, but I wasn't. So that was just, similar concept where, we got to speak to your people and truly stand, if you really want to be open, if you really want to be psychological safe, you got to like push yourself to figure out what that actually means. Because sometimes when you in your head feel like you've checked all the boxes, sometimes you're still missing.
Oh yeah, like I'm an ex-business owner myself. I used to own my own or founded my own digital marketing agency ages ago. And I think when you're at the top, you kind of, yes, I am open. Yes, I am inclusive. Yes, I do all of these things. And sometimes you forget that maybe, especially when you grow, there's somebody at the bottom might actually not have the same feelings as you because maybe, you're too busy with meetings to have a chat with them or something like that.
Yeah, that's very fair. So we've got to be humble. And
Yep.
we always got to be open. During another presentation, you discussed the importance of language and cultural identity. And you gave the example of the Just Eat campaign in Belfast. Can you explain why that campaign was considered offensive?
I'm not sure how well versed people in the audience are going to be on Northern Irish history, but I'm sure that you've probably heard of the IRA, you've probably heard of the Orange Order, and you've probably heard of the Troubles. So basically, to put it very simply, green is associated with, people who would like a united Ireland. And then orange is more associated with people who want to remain part of the UK. I mean, of course, there are people from, Catholic backgrounds who don't see that side of it. Or, or people from Protestant backgrounds who, don't get involved with this kind of stuff, of course, as well. But just genuinely, that's kind of how you could put it. So those two colours are very kind of fueled up in Belfast, especially with things like Brexit still happening. It's just, causing some issues up there that maybe things should have been dealt a little bit better, or I don't know. I'm not going to get into my personal views on the topic. That would be
no
good
need.
to say. But basically, Just Eat up in Belfast, they went from red branding to orange branding. And as you can imagine, orange branding kind of has those political connotations with the color orange. So yeah, some people didn't think that, it represented, a united Northern Ireland kind of front. And maybe they should have stayed with their red branding. Another one that's quite famous in Northern Ireland is Orange, the phone provider. And their slogan was, "The future's bright, the future's orange." And you can imagine how that went down in Northern Ireland, because people are like, yes, the future's bright, the future's Protestant. And that happened back in 1997, I think it was. And it's still a running joke today. Not in a good way.
No, not at all. That was definitely a miss.
Exactly.
Wow. It's interesting. I wasn't aware of the colors, but I am a bit of a Game of Thrones geek. So it's just interesting. In Game of Thrones now, we've got our green versus our blacks. And I'm sure that concept came from at Northern Ireland.
Possibly. I think, people don't assume that like colors can cause so much of an issue in branding, but, you've got to know the country that you're expanding into. And there are some countries that are going to be more complex than others because of history, stuff like that. And Northern Ireland happens to be one of them.
Well, I love that example. Thank you for sharing. So before we wrap up, I want to talk a little more on a personal level. I know you're a musician, something that maybe you stopped a little bit, but brought back up. We'd love to know how you incorporate music in your life.
I think music is definitely my de-stressor. After a hard day's work, saving the world from SEO tool malfunctions and stuff like that, or cognitive biases in the workplace or in the SERPs and things like that. If I'm feeling stressed, playing the violin really, really helps. I used to actually play the electric guitar, and I'm a big fan of metal music, surprisingly. But after an accident, I haven't actually been able to play the guitar ever since. So for me, kind of the violin is my only outlet that I kind of have that I can do really easily. And, I have it in my office. And if I get stressed for 5 minutes, you can it's a good thing I don't have a webcam or something in the office all the time, because you'll see me just playing every now and again just to, decompress.
When you talk about metal and then violin, it makes me think of, there was a band, I don't know if you remember them, in the late 90s, early 2000s, called Yellow Card. Kind of a punk band, but what was cool about them is that they have a violin together. So they've got a violin in all their songs, but then they've got heavy, it's not heavy metal, but definitely something you should check out. I think you might appreciate the combination of both, which is pretty cool.
I definitely will do, because I'll be honest, for a violinist, it's going to sound really weird, but I hate classical music. It's so boring. So I normally play kind of Irish trad or Scottish trad. And one thing I like doing is kind of making up my own little versions of, violin covers of metal songs and doing things like that. So, I think I'll like them.
Well, Sarah, where can people learn more about you and Dragonmetrics?
Dragonmetrics.com. Definitely recommend them, because I used them before I started working with them, and brilliant tool. And brilliant employer as well. So, everything all works out well. For me, I actually made myself a website 2 weeks ago. So Sarah Presch.
Ooh, lovely.
I know, sarahpresch.com or LinkedIn. I'm quite, active on LinkedIn. I do have Twitter, but I don't use it.
Well, Sarah, this has been a really informative and just getting me to think a lot. And I hope for our listeners or viewers to think a lot behind all the actions that we take in digital marketing. But it's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Digital Marketing Mentor. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into the Digital Marketing Mentor. We'll speak with you next time. Thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Mentor podcast. Be sure to check us out online at thedmmentor.com and at the DM Mentor on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more marketing mentor magic. See you next time.